why you had that conversation up front. It's like, this can't just be a one-time thing. We got to make this, how do we do this the rest of the year when it's not just Pride Month?
Yes,
Otherwise,
exactly,
it's like
exactly.
a Band-Aid on a broken bone. It's not going to really,
Exactly,
really fix the
exactly,
issue. So
exactly.
one mistake that leaders make is not being fully engaged, and how you're to talk about that is really not only just in writing the check, signing up for working with you or something like that, but really from their communication from top
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
explain to people why consistently and throughout all time. Are there any other mistakes that you've seen leaders do that undoes potentially all the progress that they're making throughout the organization?
The one of the biggest things. So aside from leaders saying, "Of course we're inclusive," we have blank month. That's a big one. But the other one is, and this is for every leader. And in my book Pride Leadership, in the workshops I do with clients, the biggest way to shoot yourself in the foot as a leader is to engage in what's called silent collusion. And that's where, so I'll tell a quick story. So I was in Atlanta, and me and one of my top doggers, which is what I call my consultants, Lori. And Lori and I are sitting there around this boardroom table. We're closing out a client project we were doing for several months, and it's all everyone else in there is this company. At the very head of the table is the senior executive, and he's male, and that's important to the story. And he's having a chat with somebody else. And just as the meeting's about to start, you know how sometimes you're in a meeting and you don't realize how loud you are because everyone stops talking at the same time. That's kind of what happened here. And you hear the senior executive say, "Well, you know how all women drive," and everyone just kind of stopped and looked at him, but no one said a word at that one moment in time. And so at that moment, everybody in that room, was engaging what's called silent collusion. We were silently supporting or approving that statement by not saying anything against it, or making it known that we didn't agree with it. And so I've seen leaders totally undermine their own credibility by engaging in silent collusion in the workplace. And that's not easy to do. So it can sound like a bunch of different ways. In my book, Pride Leadership, I actually talk about the 6 strategies that I've developed, which is called MOPSAM. And I use this really cheeky, dumb story where it's if you look at this, there's a type of dog called a Hungarian pulley mop. It looks like if you stick a stick on his back, you could scrub your floors with that kind of dog. You might have seen those before, like little
Sure, yeah.
dreadlocks. Yeah, yeah. So that's called a mop dog, and then I named him Sam. And so this is the educator of 25 years of me kind of
Mnemonic
being cheeky.
device. I'm with you. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So the mop Sam is actually the 6 steps that you can do to combat silent collusion in the workplace in that moment. It's everything from pointing out the stereotypes like Bob. We'll pretend Bob is the executive. What did you mean by that? And of course, each one has their own pros and cons. Like that one with the ask, we call it. It's the A in Sam, if you will. It can be really touchy the way I ask that. Like, Bob, what did you mean by that? Versus Bob, what did you mean by that? Same words, very different meaning in both those sentences. So, but that's one opportunity. What happened in this scenario I was sharing was no one said a word. I'm about to, because this is my jam, and even if with a client, Lori kicks me under the table and she goes, "Wait." And I'm so glad she did this. So I didn't say a word, but luckily I didn't, because what seemed like 20 minutes later, but it wasn't. There was a gentleman. He wasn't even at the table. He was like younger with the business. He might have even just like graduated from college or B school or whatever. But he was sitting not at the table, but like the chair row behind, like against the wall. And all you heard him say, he folded his arms. He just went, "Damn." And it said, and that's actually the S in Mop Sam is say a non-word that indicates at least you don't agree with it. And so that's what he was doing. He didn't know Mop Sam, but he was just doing that refuting of the statement. And what it did is it was two things. It showed everybody in the room that he did not agree with that statement. And then it actually started the floodgates. People like, "Yeah, Bob, what did you mean by that?" Or, "Bob, we drove with Juanita to lunch the other day, and she was a very good driver." So that's a specific you point out. And so it kind of, Bob, "Oh, I didn't mean it, blah, 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 blah." But just that one thing really started the conversation of like, "Yeah, what's going on here, Bob?" And that's one, if your listeners are falling asleep, that's the golden advice I would share is don't engage in silent collusion, because a couple things happen. You erode your own credibility as a defender of the other. People look at you and say, "Wow, well, that wasn't about me." Let's say in this case, I'm male. Bob wasn't being a jerk about male driving. But what happens when Bob does say something against, for me, I'm gay, against gay people, will you, leader, defend me then? And so people start thinking, because us leaders are always on stage, we are always in the spotlight, and people are always watching. And I think that's the other thing. And but on the opposite side, if you do engage in mitigating silent collusion using MopSam or whatever, you build trust with people because they see you as the defender of the otherness, of being inclusive, and that just adds street cred to your leadership bank account, if you will.
Wow, what a great story on multiple levels, and I'm so glad that you got to wait and pause and see what was gonna happen and allow that dynamic to unfold. What a cool organic thing to see,
Yeah.
and hopefully Bob got the beginning of self-awareness.
I think he did, and he's, oh, I
Okay.
didn't mean it, and he it was that unconscious bias bubbling up into we call it a microaggression or microinequity. In this case, him being sexist, and didn't realize it, but now he had a blip of an awareness, and hopefully, I haven't talked to Bob in a while, but hopefully he's on that path to be a little less or a little more sensitive to those types of situations.